Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibis, happy late Friday night. Hope you've had a good day. I'm Gigi. Welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I decided to go ahead and get this done late tonight because if you're new to the podcast, my grandmother is 88. She's my ride or die. She's staying here with me because she was sick around Christmas and we didn't get to have Christmas with her. So tomorrow, Christmas in February. So I wanted to be done with this trial for the week and actually enjoy my weekend without feeling like I got to get up and get this out tomorrow. So here we are. I want to give a big thank you to Rebecca, Carrie, Susan, Eleanor, and Terry for your donations. Very generous of you guys. I'm grateful. And music fact of the day. Did you guys know that Bob Marley was a very, very good palm reader? So this was when he was a very young child. It used to freak people out because he was so accurate. But at the tender age of 7, he decided, I want to be a singer, and did not read palms again. So there you go. Neat little fact. Never knew it. Okay. Also, want to give a big thank you to our sponsors of the week. Thrive Market just did my order for the next 2 weeks. Love them. And Little Spoon, some good healthy food for your little ones. Check them out. If it weren't for the sponsors and the donations, your girl would not be here. So I don't charge for content, never will. So I rely on advertisers to help me do what I do. So we started the day with Mr. Tinsley, which is the attorney for Mallory Beach's family. And I have a previous episode where he testified outside the presence of the jury. You can go back and listen. It was really quick. He wasn't on the stand very long, just kind of wrapped it up. But I have all that testimony if you guys need it. So the next witness, which I think was the most interesting witness of the day, Blanca Simpson, who was a housekeeper, caregiver, kind of all that. And so she had approached Alec actually about a case that she needed help with. And Alec said they would take the case if she translated and helped with the case. So after that, at times, Alec would call for help with Spanish speaking clients and he would get her to translate. And so she wanted to be able to help the Hispanic community if they had an accident because, you know, I'm sure translators are hard to come by sometimes in certain areas. And this was way back, not recent. So she assisted Alec for a while, but that eventually changed kind of into this housekeeper role because Maggie was looking for help in the home. And she asked around and no luck. And so finally, Blanca agreed to help Maggie. And I will tell you, it seems like Blanca and Maggie had a good relationship. That was really the vibe I got. I feel like Maggie trusted her because we will find out she talked to her about some personal things. So she would help with cleaning, errands, run to the bank, things like that. She interacted with the whole family and she worked every other day. And this was on the Holly Street house in Hampton. They had to sell that house after the boat crash. But a few months later, someone tried to burn this house. And so she helped Maggie with that. Now, this poor woman had a stroke in 2015 and stopped working for a while. And after the stroke, she was out almost 4 years and she went back to work once she was better. Shortly after the boating accident, she reached out to ask Alec and Maggie and said she'd be willing to help them. And Maggie asked her to come back. And she said it was like she never left. It was just they picked right up where they left off. That was about February of 2019 when she came back in the picture. And her duties were the same as before, just, you know, doing whatever errands that Maggie needed. And so the family was at Moselle and Hampton at this time. The primary residence in Hampton was where they were staying. But then once it was sold, they all kind of moved to Moselle full time. And she got really close to Maggie, she said. And after the stroke, she would see Maggie out. They would talk and catch up and things like that. And so June 7th, the day of the murders, she was working at Moselle. This was on a Monday. She had last worked the Friday. She saw Paul. He walked through the door. She was walking out of the laundry room, and Paul had a basket of clothes. And Paul said, she said, "Look, I'm about to leave." And Paul said, "Come on, Miss B. I need these clothes for the weekend." And so she stayed late. She saw him leave, and that was the last time she saw him. Um, so I'm sorry, that was, yeah, that was a, so what I do, guys, is I actually have my notes up here that are just scanned in. And so if you see me looking up, it's just because of that. So she last saw Paul, I'm sorry, on Friday, not the day of the murders. She didn't have any set hours. And she said Maggie was super easygoing and didn't care about specific hours. If Blanca needed to be gone for family reasons or whatever, she said Maggie would always say, "No worries." She talked to Maggie earlier on the day, June 7th. Maggie texted and asked to stop at the store because Alec wanted Capri Suns. And so she went to Food Line. They didn't have any. And so Maggie texted that she was at a doctor's appointment, and she said that Alec wanted her to come home to Moselle. So on the phone, she said that there was food in the refrigerator and asked if she could cook because apparently Paul loved her cooking. So she started cooking so it would be ready when everybody got home. And, but she said Maggie didn't want to come home. And they were planning some kind of a 4th of July party or something. It was a little confusing about that, but Alec asked Paul to come to Moselle as well, according to Blanca, because CB, the sunflower killer, poor dude, messed up the sunflowers, and they were going to have a little hunt that weekend. So kind of a rough draft of the text from Maggie. It says, "This is the day of the murders. Thank you. I'm waiting at the doctor. I have to leave. The door's open. His dad's back in the hospital. They're not sure if it's cancer or pneumonia." And she was really worried about Alex. She thought he was going to die because he was either working or just always on the go. And so Maggie loved Edisto, and we've heard that. She stayed anytime she could, especially in the spring or summer. It's really a beautiful area. I love Edisto. But on June 7th, she said she didn't have a set time to be there, and she ended up at Moselle, and Paul and Maggie had not made it there yet. And Alec was. He was in the bed. She said there was a couple of hours before she saw him, and he got up and left to go to work. She said he had on khaki pants, a greenish seafoam short sleeve polo shirt, a sports coat, shoes that were brown, I guess kind of like leather loafers. And so the shirt had a collar sticking up. So she fixed it. And this comes in later. So she fixed a steak burger, which in the South, we call that cube steak with gravy, white rice, green beans, right? I don't know why. I've never heard steak burger, but cube steak, gravy, white rice, and green beans is a food group here in the South. Very good. So before Blanca left, she texted Maggie that the dinner was on the stove. She would leave the food in the pots on the stove for them. So she got home and heard about the murders early the next morning. Alec called, and she said he was very shaky on the phone, and he said, "B, they're gone. They're gone." And so she just thought Maggie went to Edisto. She said, "I didn't imagine that she was dead." And Alex said, "No, they're dead." And she said she literally dropped the phone. And, it sounds like they had a great relationship, her and Maggie. So that's not only your boss, but your friend and the kids too. Cause you could tell that Paul, "Come on, Miss B, do my clothes. Okay, I'll stay late." She said she would be right over. And Alex and Buster were at Miss Libby's house in Alameda. So when she got ready to go to the house, she was told, "Don't go by the kennels." And Alec told her to go straight up to the main house. Now, this is my thing, y'all. I understand when the investigators came, that there were so many people on scene, but I was on the podcast with Joseph Scott Morgan a couple of nights ago. He said, number one, Alex should have been taken to the police station and interviewed by himself. Get a lawyer if you want, and then the fact that the crime scene was just not secured, and there were people showing up all hours of the night of the murders in the house that had not been searched. And I'm always wondering why Alec didn't say, hey, look, nobody come here. This is an active crime scene. We need to get this place searched and see, if the perpetrator came in the house. Now, I'm going to tell you my feelings right now. I'm very conflicted, to be honest with you guys. I know what I feel, but at the same time, it's so circumstantial that I don't know what the jury's going to do. It's going to be a very interesting deliberation and verdict. I think we're a couple of weeks out, but still, we're getting there. So when she got there, Sled was there, and Alex said people would be bringing some food, so he wanted the house to look clean, which is like a number two reason. Like, she's going in and picking up clothes off the floor that Sled might need to test. She normally would come in from the kennels, but she went in the other way. So on June 8th, she saw nobody before she got to the main house, actually. And she was emotional at this point. And once inside, she said it was hard because Maggie wasn't coming back. And she didn't want to move any of her stuff, but she said it was a weird feeling. She locked the door. It just felt cold in there. And she didn't turn on the lights. So she went to the kitchen and she stopped and looked at the stove, and there were no pots on the stove, which was unusual. Apparently, if they ate dinner that she cooked, they would leave the pots on the stove and she would clean them up, or the plates would be in the living room, that kind of thing. So she said it was just rare that they would put the pots in the fridge or even in the sink. So she walked through the kitchen, and to the left, there's two freezers and a refrigerator. And then there's a laundry room, and then there's steps to outside. So one weird thing she noticed, in the doorway of the laundry room, there was a set of pajamas that were Maggie's. And she said, number one, Maggie would not put her clothes there. Number two, this is sort of personal, but it was testified to and streamed across the world, so I'll say it. Maggie apparently did not like wearing undergarments with her PJs. But the PJs were folded up neatly with a pair of underwear on top. And she thought that was really weird. So she opened the refrigerator. The pots are inside with the lids on them. She says, that's not normal. She didn't look to see if they had even eaten. But, on the other hand, there were a lot of people at Moselle during that night. It could be just somebody grabbed it and put it up. I'm not saying this is anything, but to her perception, it was weird. And that's, definitely why she testified, because she knows them. Jury, by the way, very engaged in her testimony. This is maybe like the fourth witness where they all did not move their eyes. They were interested to hear. We're getting close to the end of the state's case. So I hope the witnesses are going to be just powerful. Everyone needs to be powerful, because it's, I don't know about you guys. I feel like that the circumstantial case is definitely there, but I don't know. It just feels a little disorganized to me, and I'm not sure. Look, here's the thing. If Alec gets convicted on 3 of these financial crimes, he's going to prison for life. Those aren't hard to prove. You got a paper trail. But, I really still would not be surprised at all if this ends up in a hung jury. Just saying. So in the master bath, her clothes were sitting next to the bathtub. And then by the shower on the floor, there was a puddle of water, khaki pants, dun, dun, dun. So what happened? She washed them. And then she went to see if there was anything else that needed to be done. So in the closet, there was a damp towel on the floor and a t-shirt. Apparently he had a stack of t-shirts kind of up on a shelf. One of those had fallen off and was kind of folded on the floor. So it was clean. So she put it back up. And she explained kind of how the closet was laid out. Like Maggie had some small shelves for her stuff. And on top, he kept t-shirts on these shelves, and they were folded up there. She washed those clothes, and then she explains like what drawers hold things for Alec, and like I don't need to tell you which one was his whitey tidy drawer, but so we had a little break. We got back at 11, and Judge Newman tells Harpootlian essentially to like sit down because he's just standing up, and Judge Newman's ready to go, and it was kind of funny. So they show her an exhibit, and they ask if she sees the pants and recognizes them, and she says yes. I took care of the laundry. I recognize those pants. She said they were kept in the left dresser in the third or fourth drawer of Alec's furniture. The shorts were clean the last time she saw, and she had seen the shirt before. He kept it on the top shelf. We're talking about the t-shirt he was seen on the body cam footage in. And so she was asked again if that shirt on the floor was clean, and yes, it was. So they show the Snapchat video again, and they freeze the video. And it shows Alec, as we know, in the khaki and the loafers, which she said were kind of like his house shoes that he would kind of just slip on if he needed to go do something really quick. And she called them his house shoes. I haven't got to zoom in on that yet. I don't know if they're kind of just like nice looking house slippers or what, but and then she talks about the blue shirt. She says it's a Columbia shirt, and she calls it Seafoam. And she said, they were like, why are you calling this Seafoam? And she said, well, me and Maggie had looked at color palettes when she was going to paint the Edisto house, and Seafoam was a color that they liked. And I know what Seafoam is. It's clear. It's a guy. These dudes don't know what they're doing up there about paint things and stuff. So she never saw the shirt again. She never saw that shirt. All colors but blue were in the closet. So the shirt in the Snapchat video, gone. Never saw it again. And the house slippers, not there. Never saw them again. He usually kept those in the closet. He had like the Sperry boat shoes that used to sit in the closet after the murders. Never saw those again either. So she stayed and worked for Alec, but the job changed at Moselle after the murders. After Paul and Maggie were murdered, Alec didn't stay at Moselle. So on the 10th, we know Mr. Randolph passes away. And after the services, Alec called and asked if they would maintain the Moselle property. So her and her husband actually stayed on the property, and they were living in to maintain the house at $1,500 a week. So she said, like the grass, it would take 2 days to cut because they took care of the dogs, Grady and Bubba. And she also said that the blue shirt that we see in the Snapchat video is not the shirt that he left for work that day in. So the reason is she fixed the collar. It was sticking up, and she knew that wasn't the shirt. But okay, so if I'm on the defense, and believe me, I'm not like trying to say anybody's innocent. I'm still on the fence right now, to be honest with you. But you live in the low country in June. The humidity is so bad. Here in the upstate, it's bad. It's even worse in the low country. It is not unusual for people in the South to change clothes 2 or 3 times a day if you're outside because you get sticky, sweaty just going to the mailbox. If I'm on the defense, that's going to be my argument. But just a side note, we talk about Bubba, the dog, who she has. She has custody of Bubba. That was Paul's dog. And Bubba had his own little pen, and he would get chickens. And if they got out of the coop, he would catch them. And she said you would have to pry it out, and he would growl if you tried. And she was asked, would family be able to get the chicken out of the mouth quicker? And I mean, just such a weird question, but she said he's stubborn and it would take time to get the chicken out of his mouth. I would freak out and be like, oh my God, poor chicken. But she had this conversation with Alec about the shirt, by the way, on the property. It's a small 2-bedroom house that's on the property. And so he had come to get clothes and eat. And in August, this conversation happened in August. He walked into the little house and he said, B, I need to talk. Sit down. He was pacing around. He said, I've got a bad feeling something isn't right. He said, there's a video you remember in the Vineyard Vine shirt I was wearing. She said he wasn't wearing a Vineyard Vine shirt. And Blanca was a little thrown back. She said she doesn't remember that because she fixed the collar on that shirt that morning and it was not this shirt that he was saying he was in. She was confused and she said, I know what he was wearing when he left. And she wondered if he brought this up in case she was asked about it. So on September 4th of 21, there's a conversation with Alex where Alex asked her to send 2 photos of his insurance cards. Now, September the 4th, what happens? Roadside shooting. And she sent a photo of his Blue Cross Blue Shield card, but it was plastic. And he said, I want the paper one. Well, that was in Maggie's purse. And she said, it's in Maggie's purse. And he said, it's okay if you go in and get it. And he said he's getting routine checkups. And she's like, wait, this is Saturday. But she got the card and sent pictures. So they showed the exhibit with the text about the cards. And after September the 4th, they quit living at Moselle. This was after the roadside shooting. And very quickly it's established it was not some random dude in a truck. It was staged and all that. So they quit living at Moselle. And so then she's asked, did you look at Maggie's Mercedes after the murders? And the week after the murder, she was asked to pick up Maggie's car from impound. And so Randy dropped Paul's truck and he was the one that asked her to get Maggie's car. So she said in the car, there's still paint in there that Maggie had got to paint the Edisto property. And so she cleaned the car out and she moved the seat. Get this, under the driver's seat, what does she find? Maggie's wedding band, which had all of us like, whoa, because look, I've lost my wedding band before and I freak out until I find it. You know, it's happened a couple of times. It happens to the best of us, but it's one of those things that you normally don't take off. And if you do, it's not in a car. So just speculation on my part. Is it something that maybe Maggie wasn't wearing at Edisto? On the other hand, we really haven't heard that they were having any huge marital problems. Who knows? But the other point is if her car's in impound and it's being searched, why are we still seeing like wedding bands underneath the seat? You see what I'm saying? It's like nothing was, it doesn't seem like anything was really searched in a way it should be. But she told Blanca a few months before the murders that she had something to tell her. And Maggie made them both coffee and they just went to the hunting room and shut the door. Alec was sleeping on the other side of the house. And so the prosecution said, did she say anything about money problems? Well, what happens? The jury gets sent out. So Harpootlian said, this is hearsay, and he asked for a mistrial. And he says, you can't unring the bell. The jury heard that, ultimately denied. The prosecution apologizes. Judge Newman kind of gets a little snappy, but, you know, look, he's tired. The man's got a lot on his mind. And yeah, it was a little bit of a stressful day, I think. And there's a lot of hearsay coming in, you know, what he says. And so they kind of proffer the witness. Maggie was worried about a lawsuit for $30 million in the Mallory Beach civil suit. Maggie was crying and just saying, we don't have that kind of money. And she said, if I would give them everything, I'd do it. And she said, we'll start over. I just want the lawsuit gone. And so they bring the jury back in and they, also, Alec was not being, Maggie felt like Alec was not being truthful with her about the lawsuit. And she said, he doesn't tell me everything. So they played the kennel video. They're doing this with everybody who knew the family and knew their voices. She identifies all 3. And she previously thought she had heard another voice when she watched this prior to testifying. But she said now she's certain it's just the 3 of them. She said Maggie did not go to the kennels at night because she was scared and it gets dark there. I've seen video and it does. This is in the middle of like hunting land. So the kennel lights, yes, bright around there, but I mean, you probably can't see a foot in front of your face once you get past, if those lights are off or you get far enough away. She would go during the daytime, and she also said that Grady and Bubba, their two dogs, would alternate going with her to Edisto. She kept one of them with, but we know Bubba was Paul's dog. And they ask about Alec's cell phone use, always on the phone. And I'm curious why the cell phone use is coming in so much, because maybe that's going to be next week. But there's specific things that they're asking every witness that knew them about, and we don't know why yet, really. Paul, of course, always on the phone. She said in the shower, he would play country music on his phone while he took a shower. And so back to June 8th, they talk about the puddle in the bathroom, the rug, the towel, the khaki pants, no blood on them, by the way, when she picked them up to wash them. So they play that snap video again and asks her to identify Alec, and again, they reiterate, never saw those clothes again. So on cross, Alec referred to you as a friend and never a housekeeper. And she said, yes. And you did interviews with Sled and you said Maggie was, quote, his all, end quote. And she said he adored her and he loved her. Then she's asked, did you see them argue? And she said, minor disagreements because of remodeling for one, but Maggie wanted a certain color and, that was maybe a little thing, but nothing too serious, nothing out of control. And Maggie said she wanted him to sit and listen to her for 10 minutes because he was always on the go. So you could see where things irritated her, but I mean, by far. So with every witness we've listened to, it doesn't sound like they were on the outs, but that's the facade. Everybody leads a different life behind closed doors. So we don't know. Maybe that'll come in. And we've always heard about the text that she was suspicious of going to Moselle that night. And I don't know if that's going to come in at some point next week or not. But on the morning of the 7th and the 8th, she left before anyone got home. And no, I just wait, yeah. No, this is on cross. I'm sorry. Wait, yeah, I'm confusing myself. It's almost midnight, so y'all give me a pass. But she was talking about the dinner plate. Sometimes, most of the time, they would be in the living room, and that day they were in the sink. So on the night of the 7th, there were like 15 people in that house. And did any of those move food to the fridge? They mentioned that Alec's sister was there, and she said, I don't know. I really think that seems like the probable answer is that, people just did what they could. When things happen like this, and it's a tragedy, I've never dealt with murder, but I've dealt with shocking deaths. And, sometimes you go to the home and you just do whatever you can to help. You grab like a duster and, because people are going to be coming over. So I don't think that the dishes or the other stuff being in the fridge is a big deal. So she went from his parents' house to Moselle on the 8th, where the police, they were around the house. Nobody told her she couldn't go in. And Harpootlian said it's strange that there's no law enforcement at the house that morning. I'm sorry, she said there was nobody at the house. And they were all over the kennel side, is what was ultimately said. So Harpootlian says, did they search the house, ask you about clothes or anything like that? Anything out of the ordinary? And she said, they didn't ask me anything, which is just so odd. I don't get it, y'all. This is a huge case. And you've got SLED, you've got the FBI coming in, you've got all these agencies. And it just, I mean, I don't know if you put a column of things that were done wrong and things that were done right, it's really not going to be even. It kind of blows my mind, y'all. I mean, what do y'all think? Let me know in the comments. Is it sort of special treatment, or what do you think? Because I just feel like there was a lot missed, and I think the defense is going to jump on that when they start their case. So they didn't ask her about anything, and at that point, she hadn't picked up the clothes from the floor. She did saw agents go to Paul's room and walk around, but after they left, she saw the khaki pants on the floor. And the pants were similar to what he was seeing in that Snapchat video but she also said he had several pairs, so she couldn't be sure. And yeah, I mean, if you know people that wear kind of the same thing, you got 10 different pairs of the same pants. But she said Alec took a lot of showers, or she was asked, did he take a lot of showers? She said, I don't know. I know he did in the morning. And they point out it's not unusual to find towels on the floor. And she said, no. And so Harpootlian says, you can't remember the shirt. And she said, no, sir. So on the 7th, Alec's not there, went to his mom's. You don't know what he's wearing. They're talking about the night of the murders. He goes to his mom's. You don't know what he was wearing that night. But Sled confiscated his clothes, and she said, well, now I know they did. There's objections flying everywhere, y'all, just left and right. Harpootlian said, do you know what he wore to his mom's? She says, no. Did you see blood on his pants? Nope. Did you see any blood in the bathroom? Nope. So she cleaned the shower because nobody told her not to. And her cell phone is Verizon, so she reiterates what we know, which is service is very sporadic at Moselle. Calls drop. You could walk from one point of the house to the other, it drops. So, and she said down at the kennels, it was kind of touch and go with the signal. And if you were able to get a signal, like you didn't move, you stayed there. CB said the signal out there was horrible. Remember, CB is the guy that maintained the grounds and killed sunflowers. CB, man, I just want to meet you and say, you know what? It's okay. You killed the sunflowers, dude. I've given CB a hard time and he didn't mean to do it. August 2021, Alec talked about the shirt he had on. And Blanca said it seemed like he was telling me what he had on. There's an objection. So did he tell you that he just finished? Objection. The jury sent out, right? So then about the shirt, did he tell you he had just been interviewed by Sled? And she said no. So they did that outside the presence of the jury. They take a break at that point. But Randy had dropped Alec off to go to a golf tournament. And Buster, they have Buster stand up, and she said he's a good kid. Poor Buster, they're making him stand up every day. It's a little awkward. Did you ever see Paul with a gun? Yes, all the time. In his cars, ATVs, on the golf cart. He'd leave guns occasionally at the hangar, like a rifle. And I'm not sure why they're wanting to talk about guns being left at the kennel, because here's my point. If you're the defense and you're saying that Alec didn't do it, if somebody's coming to murder 2 people, they're not going to come to murder 2 people in the hopes that they've left guns there. They're going to bring their own. But I'm just curious why they're kind of staying focused on these guns being around the kennels and Paul being irresponsible with them. She didn't know if he left them in the feed room, but she said if he left it on the golf cart, she'd get it, and sometimes there'd even be rust on it. Mostly Paul would go to the kennels in his car. It was a car called Dolly, or which is his truck, I guess. And then sometimes a golf cart. He asked if Sled came to take photos. She was not positive. She never saw the rain jacket, the infamous rain jacket / tarp at Moselle. She said Alec wore a 2XL. And we know, I think that jacket was a large, but I'm going to tell you, y'all, if that was a large, I'd hate to see like an XL, 2XL. They had to fold that out on 2 separate tables when they were testing it, if you remember. She said he maybe had 1 or 2 pieces of clothing that were large. And so they show the photo of the snap video again, not wearing, that's not the shirt he was wearing that night. They ask about the raincoat. She said he had too many raincoats, but none like that. And they talk about the text between her and Maggie the day of the murders. Talk about the Capri Suns. Apparently, he prefers orange and pineapple flavor. Just in case you want to put some on, like some money on his commissary books. Make sure they got orange and pineapple Capri Suns. At 3:28 p.m. On the day of the murders, Blanca texted Maggie, dinner's on the stove, and she saw the white truck at the kennels and didn't lock the door. So at 3:54, Blanca says, you're welcome. I made your deposit. Maggie says, thank you. I'm at the doctor. Alec's dad is back in the hospital. Alec is about to die. And Maggie would get frustrated because anytime his parents needed something, Alec was always the one who was called when something was up, nobody else. So he would get up and go. And Maggie said, I'm scared for him, Alec, and all of us. And she was just worried about like the state of Alec's health and the stress. And then I think what they were saying is when she said worried about him, she's meaning Randolph. Because at this point, we know he's terminal. Maggie preferred Edisto, but she was coming because Randolph was back in the hospital and she was worried about Alec. There was an objection that was sustained. Maggie said Paul was coming and dinner needed to be made for Paul and Alex too. So Alec wanted her at Moselle, but there was a lot of work that needed to be done at Edisto. Apparently, they were doing some remodeling, and Maggie wanted to stay because the house was open. So apparently, they were in a stage of construction where you couldn't lock it up. So she just was super concerned about whatever was being done at Edisto and didn't really want to go. But she said Sled never asked her about Alec's clothes until recently. So June of 2021, did they ask any other questions about June 7th? And they asked when she saw Alec, asked when she talked to Maggie, and wanted to see her phone. She said that she was close to both Maggie and Alec. And had you heard Maggie say people in Hampton shunned her, ignored her, and that she was worried about Paul because he had received threats? And apparently Paul just had to leave Hampton altogether because after the boat crash, he was kind of getting yelled at in public and things like that. We know that as a busy parent, you don't have time to completely overhaul your life in the new year. One change that's easy to make that will make your life easier in 2023 is Little Spoon. Most of the baby and kid foods at the grocery store is heavily processed and often on the shelf longer than your little one has been in this world. Not cool, and not the quality nutrition our kids deserve. Little Spoon makes everything fresh, organic, and uses absolutely nothing artificial. It's just like homemade, all delivered to your door and ready in seconds. From baby food to big kid, Little Spoon has you covered for years. Little Spoon even hides vegetables and chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, and more. Their smoothies come in pouches that make on-the-go snack easy, healthy, and tasty. And yes, I tried one. They're great. Did I mention it comes right to your door? It's flexible, easy, and everything stores in the refrigerator or freezer. You can pick your menu for a variety of foods to introduce to your child. The price is right, the quality is unmatched. So make this year's chaos a little more manageable with time-saving, delicious, and healthy meals and snacks your kids will love. Go to littlespoon.com and enter my code WhatTheWorld at checkout to get 50% off your first Little Spoon order. That's littlespoon.com and enter WhatTheWorld for 50% off at checkout. I love Thrive Market. I've been able to find brands not widely seen in stores that are much cheaper than other places online. I've been using their Foy CBD relief cream for my knee with amazing results. And this is just one example of the many products you can find to better your life, from foods to beauty to health. As a Thrive Market member, I can save money on every single order. And on average, I save 30%. On my last order, I saved $93. On top of the massive savings on each order, Thrive Market has a deals page that changes every day. It gives me cash back on many brands, and they have a price match guarantee. You can search dietary restriction using filters, and even better, they help a family in need with their 1-for-1 membership matching program. You join, they give. Join Thrive Market today and get 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. Go to thrivemarket.com/whattheworld for 30% off your first order plus a free $60 gift. That's Thrive, THRIVE, market.com/whattheworld. Thrivemarket.com/what. She was asked on the 8th, did you go in the gun room? She said, I went in, but I didn't do anything. She said, in the kitchen, was there any indication anyone was there the night before? And she said, no. So I mean, we know there were people in the house, but so on Redirect, the Snap video, the clothes in the closet on June 8th, did you see another dress shirt? And never worked at Alameda, been over there once to drop something off. All that, she's like, that's correct, that's correct. Never saw the shirt again. You never saw the rain jacket at Moselle? No. Have you ever seen this shirt again? No. Once I moved close to the little house, Alec was purchasing different clothing, shorts, and shirts after the murders. And she said he was buying like Vineyard Vines polo type shirts. And she's asked on redirect, what shirt did he say in August to say he wore? And she said it was a Vineyard Vine shirt. That's not what he wore. So where was the blue shirt kept? And she said on a shelf. And so then she's asked whose idea was it for Maggie to come to Moselle? That was objection overruled. And Alec wanted her to come to Moselle. So on recross, they make the point that after the murders, before the murders, Alec was overweight. Afterwards, he started dropping a lot of weight. I remember seeing a picture of him in Buster somewhere just a couple of months after the murders. He had dropped a ton of weight. So they're just saying essentially, isn't it reasonable he might go buy smaller clothes? She says, I guess. So in the Snapchat video, she said it was a Columbia shirt. So Harpootlian says, doesn't Columbia have a logo? And she said, I'm not saying and they zoom in like on where that logo would be. And she said, I'm not saying it's the brand, it's just the style. She said she washed those khakis herself and those brown slip-on loafers. Those were his go-to shoes for normal stuff. And then he asked, when were you asked about clothes? And she said, when they interviewed me, I guess like a couple of days after the murders. But the next witness, a sweet, sweet lady, Berlinda Rast. She is hard of hearing. She is the current caregiver for Miss Libby. She's been there between 4 and 5 years. And she's a native of Varnville. She is a CNA who does home health care. And when she started, Libby was getting along okay. She was able to do things for herself, make sure she didn't leave the house and things like that. But now, unfortunately, Miss Libby is bedridden and she's total care. So she said that Miss Libby was her family. And that's just how it goes in home health. I did that for a hot minute. You do get very attached to the people you're taking care of. And her shift was 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. every other weekend. And then on normal, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. on normal days. And then every other weekend, she did 7 p.m. to 8 to 9 a.m. So on the day of the murder, she switched shift with Miss Shelley, or she would have been working. But she got a call to come because they wanted to tell her something. So she knew Maggie, but not a whole lot. She said, and this was really, really sweet. And I love these stories about Paul because I've said it before. I never really saw Paul as a victim until this trial and what was done to him. And I've always said we've all made bad mistakes, some worse than others. Unfortunately, his worst mistake cost a beautiful life. But by all accounts, it seems like there was a lot of good in Paul. But, when you're raised to believe that you're better than everybody else and that you can get away with anything, it's the blame doesn't just lie with Paul. And I'll say that. And I'm very, very sympathetic to the Beach family. I mean, my goodness, Mallory was gorgeous. And, if you watch the HBO special, even her boyfriend, Anthony Cook, who seemed to love that girl to the moon and back, forgave Paul. And so I think that it's pretty clear Paul had a lot of good qualities, but this really touched my heart. Paul would visit often. He would go visit his grandparents often. He was polite. He would do things for them. He would say, Grandma M, would you like some ice cream? He said that she loved ice cream, and then he would kind of tease her with it and then would give it to her. He came more than the other grandchildren. So then she's asked to identify Alex. She does. She said Alex seldom came, maybe 6 or 7 times in the year she worked. But then again, you got to realize she's working a night shift. So, I can see where maybe she wouldn't see him that often. But she took care of Randolph at times just when he needed help, obviously towards the end there when his health got bad. But for the most part, she was a caregiver for Libby. And before he passed, did Alec come late at night? This is what she's asked on direct. When he was called, he came the 6th with Maggie and brought donuts. Now, there was a very light, funny moment in the courtroom, and they were talking about Randolph liked donuts and had asked for some, and she she said something about, well, they were Krispy Kreme, and everybody busted out laughing. Um, because Krispy Kremes aren't everywhere. We have them here in Greenville. If you get them hot, y'all, I could eat a whole dozen. I'm serious. Like, they melt in your mouth so good. But she said, he liked donuts, or you want them. Yeah, they're Krispy Kreme. We don't have those around here. If you remember, on the 6th, they had been at that tournament for the Gamecocks, that baseball tournament that weekend. So they stopped in, and it was actually really late when they stopped by. She said he wanted donuts, but ultimately she said that Mr. Randolph's mental health was okay. So Alzheimer's, she said, Miss Libby's back in the day, she was okay. Sometimes things make sense. And sometimes, ultimately, as it progresses, the person with advanced stage Alzheimer's almost become like an infant, just total care. She would put Libby to bed around 8, and now that she's total care and in bed, she's always in bed. But before 8 o'clock was kind of her bedtime. And if family showed up and wanted to see her, she would ask, "Do you want me to wake her?" And if they did, she would wake her. So on Cross, you were asked if it's strange for Alec to show up at night. And she said it was unusual. Well, Harpootlian says, "Did you know they had been to a ball game?" And she said, "Nope." So Harpootlian said Alec and Maggie stayed about 30 minutes, and it was late. Between 9 and 11 was kind of her estimate. And then Harpootlian talks about the state of mind of Miss Libby with dementia and Alzheimer's. She couldn't walk. The witness said she can't feed herself. She can't even give herself water at this point. Sometimes she recognizes family, sometimes not. And she told her Mr. Randolph had died. She went to the funeral. Miss Libby went to the funeral. But within a couple of weeks, she would call for him and ask for him. And maybe that's a blessing if you have to be in such terrible circumstances with your grandson, who clearly was good to her, and your daughter-in-law and your husband die together. Bless it. I wish nobody had Alzheimer's. It's such a cruel disease, but it has spared her a bit from having to deal with just this unimaginable mess that this family's going through. So they talk about Paul. He had a very calming effect on Miss Libby, and so they talk about he would talk about the past, and he would ask her, "Do you remember when you whipped me with a flash water?" So a lot of the family laughs. And just a little lighthearted moment. And I like those little stories about Paul, because ultimately this is a double murder trial for Paul and Maggie. And so, I feel like this trial has humanized Paul in a way that has not been done before, which, I think needed to be done. The next witness is Special Agent Matthew Wild. He is with FBI, and he works out of Rock Hill, South Carolina, actually, which is where Buster was on the night of the murders. Buster was nowhere near Moselle. So still being floating around. Was he a second shooter? No. Buster was nowhere near there. So he supervises 5 agents and 17 people who deal with cell phone analysis. This all gets a little bit technical, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. I think Blanca's testimony really was the main thing today. So he goes through everybody's cell phone activity, and he explains for about 15 minutes how our cell phones kind of hit off of towers, and how towers have different sides. And, some towers have coverage that goes really far. So you may be far away from a tower, but you're still bouncing off of it. So for instance, Alec could be at his parents' house, still bouncing off a certain tower, but really be kind of closer to Moselle. That's just sort of how I got it. They go through the times on the phones. There was a little bit of a discrepancy about the 911 call between witnesses and the log, but it is what it is. They asked if he had brought cousin Eddie's records, and he said no, which is interesting. You would think they would, but anyways, so he was asked to pinpoint 2 phones. And to do that, you have to have activity close together. The phones have to be close together and working at the same time. So Verizon doesn't provide that stuff. I have Verizon. Like, if they're not going to provide an investigator, my cell phone tower pings and stuff, I'm going to switch to somebody else because you never know when you might need somebody to be reading your tower pings. Hopefully not, but it's a wild world, y'all. So the next witness, Nathan, I think it's Tutton. And so he was childhood friends with Paul, lifelong. He said Paul was a good person, loyal. They would hunt and fish. Spent a lot of time with Paul since early childhood, on his cell all the time. Paul was good about answering his cell phone and returning calls. And he said Maggie was the sweetest lady he'd ever met. And he knew Alec, knew them before Moselle. And they talked about there was one entrance originally. That was the dog kennel area. And the cabin, which is kind of, he lived in that cabin for a semester when he was a freshman in college. Him and Paul both lived together in that cabin. He said they talked every day, primarily with a phone call. And Paul went to USC. He said they would see each other when he was home from college. And after the boat accident, Paul got threats. People would send messages to him, according to his friend. But Paul was not comfortable being in Hampton after the boat crash, so he just stayed away. On redirect, did Maggie get threats? And he said, not that I know of. And they talk about cleaning the kennel. And so I think maybe one thing is if you notice the crime scene photos. So on the video with Paul, which we know he was murdered just a few minutes after that kennel video, I didn't see any water in those kennels. But some of the crime scene photos we've seen, there's water in the kennels. And so they ask him about cleaning out those kennels when a dog makes a mess in there. And he talks about the dog beds. You put them on the top until they're dry. And so I'm thinking I need to go back and look at that kennel video, but I don't know if the dog bed's in there and it's wet, which on redirect might start getting to the theory, did he clean up something, after the murders? So he said there were fans in the kennels for the dogs, and Paul would put his phone in his back pocket. So let's just dive into these times. They're oh no, he wasn't done. I'm sorry, I missed a page. They bring out the guns, and they would spend time in the hangar area just to hang out. But he said if Alec or Maggie left the house, they would stop by the kennels on their way out. So I think getting that in kind of might contradict Alec saying, well, I tried to call her. She was at the kennels. I just left. And so they talked about Bubba, which was Paul's dog. He was a bird dog and described as hard-headed. You couldn't catch Bubba when he had a chicken. And that's where Maggie's voice is so funny to hear on that video. And John Marvin always laughs when that video is played, when she says, he's got a chicken or whatever she says. And then Paul said, or no, he's got a guinea. And Paul says, it's a chicken. So he actually worked for Alec at the law firm. Get this. So starting in February of 2019, he started working as kind of a runner, and then he would help around the office with whatever was needed. He worked there till May of 2022. By the way, he's currently a Walterboro police officer, by the way. And so the weekend leading up to the murders with Paul, he spoke Saturday. It was a normal conversation. Paul was going to Charleston, and that was the last time he talked to Paul. He got a call from his mom the night of the murders, and a law partner also called. He went to the funeral and the wake, and that was his last time at Moselle. He said it was just really hard losing Paul, and he kept working at the firm. He said Alec was out for a while, and then, he would come in some later. So what would he do when he was making runs for Alec? Well, he would go to different attorneys' offices, get court documents, go to courthouses, cash checks at Palmetto State Bank, and then he would take it back to Alec. He said he frequently cashed checks for Alec. There were people in the office a lot. So he said when he get back, there would be Greg Alexander, who is, I believe, chief of police somewhere, Corey Fleming, Chris Wilson, people like that would be in the room. And so a few weeks before the murders, though, Alec did not ask him to cash checks. So on June 7th, after June 7th, he helped Miss Seckinger do the investigation into the stealing and things like that. If he found discrepancies, he would bring them to her. And so July 2021, he drove Alec to the airport. He said he was going to the Florida Keys with Maggie's family. He said they talked about the boat case, and he said he would like to clear Paul's name, and he thinks he can beat the boat case. So I'm thinking maybe after the murders, he thought that would give him a way to get out of the boat case. Because at this point, he's not charged with anything, obviously. So on cross, it was important for Alec to clear Paul's name. And he said, I don't know. He stood behind Paul through the criminal part of the boat case. You didn't turn your back on Paul. And he said, no, a lot did in Hampton. And are you sure it was the week of the 4th? Or are you sure it was the 4th? And he said the week of. And I need to go back and check my notes, but I'm pretty sure somebody invited Alec and Buster somewhere on the 4th. Maybe it was Chris Wilson to play golf or something, or they showed up on the boat, if you remember, and Alec had the gun in the boat. So I need to go back and see. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Sorry, I'm thinking out loud and I shouldn't do that. Talking about cashing the checks with Corey Fleming, Chris Wilson in there. Did you give him the envelope? Yes. And then he said, are you suggesting he gave the money to this Greg guy? And he said, I'm not suggesting anything. Talks about he spent time and lived at Moselle for a period of time. Paul didn't realize the 300 blackout was missing for actually a few days. And he's asked, did you know the blackout had been replaced? And he said, no. And he said, when did you learn? And he said, this trial. So he learned during the course of the trial that there was a replacement gun. So whose gun got stolen? And he said it was the 300 blackout. They had him hold a 300 blackout. And so they have him identify Paul's shotgun earlier on the stand and a 300 blackout. And so I thought it was a little odd. They're talking about the 300 blackout that was stolen had a thermal scope. And so they said, yeah, but you just said this was Paul's, but it doesn't have a thermal scope. I don't know why it felt like they were trying to trap him in that, like he had done something wrong. And he said, is this Buster's? And the witness is like, this is what I shot at Moselle, essentially. So they talk about him keeping guns in the truck. Yes. He'd clean the truck out, leave the guns at the kennels. And essentially the witness said, yeah, he was careless with guns. He liked to work with his hands. He wasn't always on his phone. That was one thing Griffin brought up. And he said, I don't know. He'd take breaks. And the jury literally, when they're like, you'd say Paul liked to work with his hands, but he's always on the phone. And the jury literally is looking at the defense like it made no sense. He said Alec and Paul, as well as Alec and Maggie, he described in the same way, a very loving relationship. So he didn't see any problems. So anyways, yeah. So we go on to these phone records that are, I don't think there's anything explosive in here, but we're going to go through them. So for Paul's phone, 5:30 to 6:09, he's in Okatee, which is just an area, right? An area in the Low Country. 6:17 to 6:53, he's traveling north towards Moselle. 7:05 to 7:30, he's around Moselle. 7:30 to 8:40, seems like he's at Moselle. 9:03, Moselle. 10:04, Moselle. So that's the Verizon. Now let's go to the iPhone location data. 7:45 to 7:56, he's near the kennels. 8:04 to 8:05, it actually hits across Moselle Road, but that could just be, a little fluke. There's kind of like a bubble of where that phone could be, by the way, on the graphic. And so 8:06, he's near Moselle. He's kind of not at the kennels, though. It looks like he's back at the house. And from 8:08 until about 8:35, it looks like he's at the house. And then At 8:38, dog kennels. 8:44, we have that movie file, the kennel video. And then 10:18 p.m., it pings again in the kennel area. So for Maggie, she first pinged in West Ashley, which is kind of like South Charleston. And she was there until around 7:05. But at 7:07, she's traveling from Charleston West towards the Moselle house. 7:50, she hits Walterboro. 30-minute drive to Moselle. At that point, no more information from her phone. That was it. So the calls to Maggie at 7:50 was not answered, but that's way before, a few hours before the murder. So Alec, 4:10 to 6:25 p.m., he's at the law firm. 6:40 to 9:10, he's at Moselle. 9:12, Moselle. 9:18, headed towards Varnville. 9:20 to 9:46 puts him in Alameda. That's still that 26-minute time frame, but again, the coverage was very broad in that area. So we know that the car data had him there for 21 minutes. So 9:52 and 9:53, it hits the Moselle Tower, but it's facing Varnville, is how I understood. This is all very technical, y'all. So then 10:06, the 911 call, that actually hits off the Varnville Tower, but they didn't feel like that was anything, he was at Moselle, but it hit that Varnville Tower. And so he explains that like the lower the frequency, the longer that signal goes. He explained that. And so at 10:17, Moselle, 10:14 to 11:01 Moselle. Now, 6:31 to 8:54 a.m., he's at his parents' house the next day. They go through a bunch of dates that really have no bearing on the murder case. So I just didn't see anything earth-shattering in the phone records. It sort of lines up with the timeline that we've kind of established and that the prosecution is agreeing to. So I think that car data, really gives the full idea of the 21 minutes that he was at his mom's house that night. So that's kind of it. We actually ended with the young man's testimony today. And so back Monday, reminder, the prosecution is expecting to wrap up by Wednesday. Thursday, the judge said we will be getting out early at 4:30. Friday is a full day. The following week, a week from Monday, number one, I'm super excited because Anjanette's coming back in town. Me and her are going to have a blast and bring you all the latest and greatest. We got to sit on my couch in my hotel room and drink some coffee and go live with y'all. I think that's what we're going to do one night. Monday, no court. Tuesday, through the rest of the week, we'll see how long. Do we get to closings maybe 2 weeks or so from today? Well, yesterday, because it's actually 12/27. We'll see. But, we're getting there. We're getting on the back end of things. And I appreciate the experience. I have to give a big fat shout out to Evan, photog extraordinaire. He's awesome, y'all. I'm going to have to put a picture up. He's on my Twitter. He is just the nicest guy and so helpful, as well as everybody at Law and Crime. I'm just blown away with how helpful everybody's been. You girls learned a lot. I really hope they send me up to Idaho to cover some Vallow Daybell for you guys. And if not, I'm going anyway by myself. Not for the whole trial, though, because that's 10 plus weeks. But maybe every couple of weeks, I'd like to be there for that. And so anyways, that's it. That closes out a very interesting week, the bomb threat. I was on with Law and Crime for over an hour on my cell phone because my backpack was under all of our tents. We couldn't touch it. And my poor little coffee, I could see it. It could see me. And we just couldn't meet up. It was sad, but all was well. We got testimony rolling that day. So another full week. We start Monday. I'll be there bringing it to you. Check out Law and Crime. You can watch on YouTube the Q&As and all the breaks that I do where I come out and update all on that one day's video on Law and Crime. Sometimes they do split it up on their social media into clips. So follow them everywhere. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, please hit subscribe, hit the like button. It just pushes this video out. The more people that like the videos, they suggest it to other people. It helps me grow and it helps me to bring you guys better content. And hit the little bell button. I'm going to definitely try to do more shorts next week. And so, anyways, hope you guys have a great weekend. I will see you maybe Sunday night. I'm going to do some updates on Valo Daybell because I'm way behind Coburger and a few other things. But right now, it's just really hard with this trial. So, you guys have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.